Welcome to The Explainer. Today we're diving into a really fascinating paper by Dr. Ömer Faruk Erdem that tackles one of the biggest challenges we face today. How do we actually truly live together in a world that feels so divided?
Think about it. We live in this world where technology has basically erased borders, right? It's created these incredibly diverse, mixed societies, and yet it feels like conflict is just everywhere, from our own neighborhoods right up to the global stage. The paper we're looking at argues this isn't exactly a new problem, but man, it is becoming more urgent than ever.
At its core, this isn't just about politics. It's a deep philosophical problem, a question that really gets to the heart of who we are. And to solve it, the author argues that philosophy has to answer two absolutely fundamental questions first. So we're looking at a two-part approach here. First, we have to look inward. We have to construct the individual, the self. And then we have to transform our outward perspective, how we see the other. Let's start with that first piece, the internal work, building a better self.
The idea here is pretty straightforward, actually. Before we can even think about fixing the world out there, we've got to work on ourselves. And the key, apparently, lies in what kind of person we choose to become. What's our ideal?
Now this is where the paper draws this fantastic contrast between two totally opposite ideals for humanity. On one side, you've got Nietzsche's Übermensch, his Superman, ferocious, competitive, always grabbing for power. And the author explicitly links this to our modern capitalist ideal. But on the other side, you have William James's moral saint, someone who is empathetic, cooperative, and seeks harmony.
And the conclusion drawn here is pretty stark. A world filled with Nietzsche's ideal? Well, it would inevitably lead to constant conflict and would basically destroy itself. But a society built on the principles of James's ideal, sympathy and honesty, that's the only one truly suited for coexistence. In fact, the paper argues that in a truly ideal society, the saint is actually the stronger of the two.
So how do you build this ideal self? Well, it comes down to actively cultivating 5 core virtues. The first 4 are the classics, straight from ancient philosophy: wisdom, courage, temperance, and justice, which is called the highest virtue of them all. But then a 5th one is added, one that's seen as absolutely essential for our modern times: empathy.
Okay, but here's the catch. Building this virtuous self is way easier said than done. The paper points to 2 major forces in modern life that are actively working against us, corrupting our ability to become these kinds of ideal people.
The first roadblock, a sharp critique of consumer capitalism. The argument is that by constantly pushing us to want more and more and more, it makes us see other people not as fellow humans, but as competitors for stuff. It directly attacks that virtue of temperance, of moderation. It traps us in what's called a cycle of desire, where shopping malls become our modern temples, making real freedom basically impossible.
The second corrupting force is what the author calls ideological religion. This is when faith gets hijacked to serve political or economic goals. When that happens, it can breed fanaticism and justify conflict. And this is framed as a total betrayal of the peaceful, empathetic messages you find at the core of most religions. It basically replaces the virtue of wisdom with dogma and empathy with tribalism.
So, if those are the internal challenges messing with the self, we can now turn to the second pillar of this whole philosophy. We have to fundamentally change how we see the other, because it turns out our current approach is seen as deeply flawed.
And the paper asks this really pointed question: is just tolerating or, enduring other people the best we can hope for? The answer given is a firm no. In fact, that kind of fragile peace is called little more than a delayed war.
And this is where the difference becomes crystal clear. On one hand, you have tolerance, which is really just putting up with someone. But a deeper Turkish concept, hoşgörü, is put forward instead. This isn't just about enduring someone, it's an active philosophical paradigm shift. It means you are genuinely trying to see what is good, what is valuable, what is hoş or pleasant in the other person. It's about moving from a defensive crouch to an open welcome.
From this point of view, the other isn't a threat to your identity at all. In fact, they are absolutely essential for you to even understand yourself. They're like a mirror, reflecting back parts of your own humanity that you couldn't see otherwise. So to ignore or destroy the other is to stay ignorant about who you really are.
And when you adopt this perspective, your whole idea of what a society should look like changes. Instead of the old melting pot model, where all the differences are supposed to be erased and melted down into one uniform identity, the paper argues for the salad bowl. In this model,
Every culture, every identity keeps its own unique character, its own flavor, while contributing to a richer, more complex, and way more interesting whole.
Okay, so this is a really powerful vision. But how do we actually build this new understanding, both in ourselves and in our societies? Well, the author is clear. We need a specific, essential tool to get the job done.
And that tool is philosophy. But not philosophy as a collection of dusty old books. It's defined here as an active practice. It's the framework, the intellectual ground, where we can have critical and respectful debates, where we can question our own biases, and where we can genuinely try to understand different worldviews without resorting to violence.
So from this viewpoint, philosophy isn't just some abstract academic exercise. It's a vital skill for modern citizenship. It is the training ground for the mind that makes empathy possible, that fights back against fanaticism, and that ultimately builds the intellectual foundation for a peaceful, diverse world.
The paper wraps up with this powerful and I think really pragmatic quote from the Bosnian leader Alija Izetbegovic. It's a reminder that the goal of coexistence might not be some perfect utopian harmony. It's probably going to be difficult, and maybe it won't always feel perfectly just. But a challenging, shared peace is always better than the alternative. The real question left for us is, are we willing to do the philosophical work it requires?